And there. All right. We've got
Uh,
episode 5. AI gets us excited.
apparently.
And probably just one of us, to be honest. It's me.
It's
Um, Spoiler alert. So, Brandon, are you feeling inspired?
I am feeling inspired. Yeah.
Nice.
How about you, man?
I'm always inspired, dude. And
Yeah.
hopefully everyone listening has had an inspiring week as well, and maybe maybe they can relate to some of the stuff we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, I'll go first if that's cool with you.
Please do. I know you had something ready to go on the agenda, so kick it off. Kick us off, man.
Yeah, it was kind of more of a funny one. Funny in the sense, more ironic. So, what's inspiring to me is big budget entertainment that's a little subpar. It's not the greatest.
Anything, any examples that come to mind?
Lord of the Rings might be an example, the
Yeah.
new show.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
and the reason they're inspiring to me is because like it kind of goes to show you can throw as much excuse me money as you want at something and
mhm.
still come out like you could have every resource in the world, and when it comes down to it, like there you could still have something missing, which is kind
Yeah.
of inspiring for me because it's like, you know sometimes I get discouraged because I don't have the budget or I don't have whatever thing I feel like I'm lacking to tell a good story, or maybe I don't have whatever it is. But it's like you see people who have everything, they have access to pretty much any talent they would want, and at the same time something gets in the way
Hmm.
and isn't a replacement for like just a single person with inspiration or um, like a good story to tell. And
Yeah.
so I've kind of felt that way. Like Rings of Power was a good example. I felt that way with like some of the Marvel stuff. It's like
Mm.
it's super cool, but you walk away being like, "Ooh, I would have done that differently," or
Yeah.
you watch critics on YouTube and they're like, "Oh, I would have done that differently," and you're like, "Oh, that makes so much sense. That would have been a great change."
Yeah.
This is just like an off the cuff idea from some random person on YouTube, and like there's an argument to be said where it's like hard to create content from scratch, and it's easier to critique something and see what you should have done. But at the same time, like other people do seemingly at least release consistent like good stuff, or
Mm.
different writers. They'll like even if it's not their best work, they're still consistently writing something that's, you know, more deep and profound or meaningful in some way, I guess. And I don't know if that
Yeah.
just comes from a place of like authenticity or like pure talent, but
Mm.
yeah. So every time I see those shows, I'm like, ooh, like it lights a fire under my butt to be like, I should be like the next writer for, something like this, or like,
Mm.
well, I can do what these people are doing at least, So like, I feel like I have some chops, I guess,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So,
I think you're right. I mean, it's the combination of like there has to be talent, and if you don't have people with a good idea who don't have talent, throwing money at it doesn't make it work.
hmm
And I think also expectations, because it's like when when you have a really great movie or a really great story, and then you follow it up with another story, the next story has to be either equally good or better. And if it's anything, slightly worse than the
hmm
first thing, then it's like, oh, it's horrible. They ruined our expectations. Even if
yeah,
like if you had reversed the order, like if Rings of Power had come out first, and then you had Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, expectations would have been different. And it's like people probably would have thought more kindly of Rings of Power because it'd be like, oh, that was our first thing. Like maybe we liked it more
yeah.
just because there was
We were
nothing to
just so,
compare it
we
to,
were so
you
desperate for
know?
anything Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, we're so desperate, but since we have Peter Jackson, yeah, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and it's so amazing, and he won all those Academy Awards, and it's been the iconic Lord of the Rings for like 20 years. Now,
Mm,
anything else that comes about, The Hobbit, whatever, it's always going to be compared to that, you know? And I mean, you have the
yeah.
same thing with Star Wars as well. You know, they made the new Star Wars movies and it was like, oh, they really fall short from the older ones and but they
Yeah.
had a huge budget and Disney made it and it was all these writers getting together and it's like the smartest thing they can think of is just recreate the same outline of the story as the other ones. It was like, really? Like all these years go by, all these comics and books and
Yeah.
different people who've like taken their spin on Star Wars and like this is the best you can think up. Like,
Is
nah,
that
you know.
so? Do you feel like that runs into the same problem with like original properties? So like the first time Star Wars came out, for instance, it's like no one really had anything to compare it to, but like people obviously latched onto it and really loved it. So it's like, there's, whereas like something else might have, like another science fiction might have came out that same year that no one really remembered, So there is
Yeah,
like there's some magic there, I guess, that, someone
I'm
did something.
I'm trying to think. I don't know. I know that Star Wars came out, I want to say 1979 was
I
when the
think that,
first Star Wars came out, I want to say. But I
yeah.
can't remember when did like Star Trek come out? Because a lot of people compare Star Trek and Star Wars, but I think Star Trek came out first, didn't it? I want to say Star Trek
Uh,
was like earlier in the 70s or something. I'm not sure. But I feel like there might have been some other space movies to compare Star Wars to in that era.
There was, yeah, a
But I
few other
think,
science fiction films that were kind of like in that vein, and obviously after like a bunch of copycats came out of people like trying to make Star Wars again in their own flavor or whatever, like those
yeah,
like Last
yeah.
Guardian or whatever the random science fiction stuff was. And maybe
Mm.
Tron came out around that time too. That was
Oh
kind of
yeah,
like
it
an
might have.
that was kind of like an overlooked science fiction. It felt like,
Yeah.
um, but
Hmm.
yeah, no, I think with the like seeing the big budget and then kind of, yeah, I don't. And what I was kind of thinking about too earlier was that, like, you know, nowadays all the special effects are like pretty good. Like, you can't really, I don't know, like, there's not a ton to complain about there, but when what feels like makes or breaks, like one of these big shows or movies is always like the writing. And I was kind of like
Hmm.
wondering why that is. Like, even if the special effects are a little bit off, it's like actually take Star Trek as the perfect example. It's like, they basically had cardboard walls that were painted as like a spaceship,
In the old original show,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And like
the
people,
effects were absurd. Yeah.
yeah, and it was like probably okay for the time, but it wasn't anything like groundbreaking. And yet like people still resonated with obviously with the plot and with the dialogue and some of the situations, so it almost felt like watching a play sometimes because the sets were so obvious,
Yeah.
and yet like that still resonated with people. So it's like, they like the writing, they
Yeah.
like the character development and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it doesn't even seem like special effects necessarily make or break something. It's
Mm.
always at the heart of of like dialogue and plot. Do you have any like theories on why that might be, or do you agree?
Well, I think that if people feel like they can relate to a character or to a situation, then a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
other details can fall apart and not be
Mm,
that. You know, like if
yeah.
it's a situation with aliens or, it's wizards or Jedi or, it's elves, it's a whole different race of species of creatures. I mean, whatever it is, it's like
Hmm.
if they show the same emotions as you, if they show the same dilemmas and problems in life, the same conflicts, and you can relate to that plot line of like, oh, they struggled with these things and this is how they overcame it, whatever it was, then I think that that's what really captures people. If the character falls flat, if you don't really feel the weight of the conflict, if the
Yeah.
resolution seemed like it was too easy, they didn't really earn it or whatever. Oh,
There's no
what was her
stakes.
name? Yeah, Ray picked up the lightsaber and suddenly she was really good. Like, that's stupid, like Luke Skywalker had to learn it for like 3 movies or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's certain stuff that just doesn't quite line up with you in terms of character and plot, then I feel like all the other cool things are cool for like a second, but then when
Mm,
you leave the movie and you reflect back on it, you think of the movie as a whole, and the whole has to do with the feeling you had with the characters and the overall story. And then it's like, I don't care about that movie. Whatever.
yeah.
It didn't really hit me.
Well,
I don't ever have to watch it again. Whatever.
maybe that's kind of the danger of a sequel then, is because like the original has already set like people's universe logic, in the mind or whatever. So it's like the original was like where everyone's head was at, and then if you try to break away and create your own like logic for this universe, it's like too hard because it's already been established. Whereas
Mm,
like because if like the first Star Wars, it's like you didn't actually have to train in the Force; it just like was bestowed upon you and gave you powers.
yeah,
Then people will be like, "Oh yeah, that's how the Force works," because it's like that's how it was in the first movie. That's how it works. And if someone like in the sequel had to like train a bunch and like struggle a bunch, then they'll be like, "That's not how the Force works." You're like,
that's
"Well,
true.
wait."
Yeah, the original movies will set the precedent for how the plot line has to go in the future. It's true.
Yeah, so you're kind of
Yeah.
like shackled in some way if you make a sequel, I guess. So
Mm,
only make original stuff, no sequels.
mm. So do you feel like for you, if you watch a movie that or a story of some kind, whether it's a book or a movie or whatever, if
Yeah.
you find a story that you maybe expected it to be really good, but then just in your own critiquing of it, you see that it kind of falls flat. Oh, this was a plot hole. Oh my gosh, I can't believe these writers made this mistake. If you start thinking to yourself like, I probably could have done this better if I had the opportunities these writers had. Does that make you write your own content more? Like, what does that do for you?
Yeah, that's kind of something I was thinking about. It was, I think, so I was trying to wondering why it inspired me, but I honestly think it just boils down to a lot of, I think with either really good stuff or really bad stuff, or stuff that you like want to enjoy and engage with that's not great,
Hmm.
it um it will actually like cause you to reflect. And I think that reflection is where good creativity comes from and good ideas come from. And so when you're like when something's close to you but it doesn't, or something that you're invested in, I guess, but doesn't live up to expectation, then you kind of dive in. You're like, why wasn't it good? Why, what didn't I like about this? Why did it rub me the wrong way? All this kind of stuff. And from there you reflect on the things that you do like in a story, and then that kind of gets the gears turning, I think, at least for me, where then I start to be go in a proactive direction of like, okay, these things bugged me because I like these things so much, or these qualities or these aspects so much. And then when I have those aspects in mind, you know I get inspired, and I'm like, oh, I have to write that down, like just recalling things that inspire me or that I really like in a story, like causes me to get excited about writing or anything like that. And so yeah, because that kind of happened with I remember Infinity War, of all things, where like I thought the movie was okay, but there was like some dead parts, and I really liked the character of Thanos. I thought that was like a cool thing.
He was a
And
good villain. Yeah.
yeah, and so it kind of like after I left that movie, it kind of felt like you're invested if you've watched all the Marvel movies up to that point. You kind of there's some emotional ties there, and um, so but then like it's over, and you're like left with this like, okay, now what, kind of thing. It was almost like a weird. It was like the finale, but it kind of left you hanging in a sense. Not, I mean, it concluded, but you're like, wow, that's the whole chunk of Marvel done. Like you obviously, they're obviously making more, but it feels like end of an era. And so like that
Mm.
kind of put me in that same reflective state afterwards, where it was, you just kind of been like, okay, what does this all mean? Like caused me to reflect, I guess. Then from there, like thought about all the things that inspired me, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. I gotta go put these in my stories and make cool villains and all this kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, and I guess that doesn't only happen from like stuff that's subpar. I think that's a fine place for it to come from, but I also get that way when you see like a really good piece of art or something, or a really
Mm,
like insane movie that blows your mind, and it's like it that also elevates you because you want to like figure it out and reflect on it. Like when I saw Blade Runner, it was like, ooh, I gotta like mull this over and find out what they're doing with their characters and all this kind of stuff. And then that also inspired me and wanted to get me to write. Is there any like examples for you maybe of things that were maybe on either end that were like so bad that you're like got inspired, or so good that you got inspired?
yeah, I think remember when I haven't watched this I don't know, whenever the last time was I watched it with you, but It's Always Sunny in
Don't say Kung
Philadelphia.
Pao. Okay.
Oh no, I wasn't gonna say Kung Pao.
So inspired.
I mean, it's funny, but I wasn't inspired by Kung Pao. No, but Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like it's, a little raunchy and vulgar and whatnot, but just the idea that it's like they really hit their comedy very well. And it was a bunch of people who really, like when you look at their origin story, they really just like landed an amazing opportunity, but they didn't necessarily have all the experience and all the equipment and the budget and it was like they just had a good idea. Like the most baseline, like minimum possible level of being able to make it. And
you had like one set.
Yeah. And it was like, dude, you guys just like were really good at your acting, really good at your writing, your characters, all the other little nitpicky details didn't need to happen. And it like totally worked out. And it's like, wow, you really can come from like small beginnings, have a really good idea. And if you get that opportunity to present it well, it's like you really can, make something really great from that. I think that's a positive inspiration where I see somebody succeed, and that inspires me and makes me feel like don't give up on pursuing a small thing, even if it doesn't seem like it'll work out. Because as long as it's a good thing, then like there's opportunity with that.
That's cool because there's like, I'm not to interrupt you too much, but it feels like there's always a lot of those things over the course of your life, in a sense, of like little like reminders to keep you on the path in a sense. But
it's true.
Yeah. Something that that inspired you in or from a bad experience.
Yeah. I remember, and I haven't seen this movie in a long time, so I'd maybe have to rewatch it, but I remember watching this movie called Pan. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like a modern version of Peter Pan. Have you heard of that?
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah.
When they do the
Did you
We Will
see it
Rock
recently?
You.
Yeah, they do this whole like "We Will Rock You" thing, and Hugh Jackman's like dancing around, and it was just it like completely takes you out of the scene. Like, what the heck is happening? Like, I don't know if they were trying to recreate like Knight's Tale. Did you ever watch that movie Knight's Tale?
I did, yeah.
Like that was a movie where they had "We Will Rock You" at the beginning of it. But it was it was meant to be a comedy, and it was kind of ridiculous, and like it kind of worked in Knight's Tale. But in Pan, it did not work. There were a lot of things that didn't work in that movie. But I totally remember, because I really love the story of Peter Pan. I've read the book like twice, and I really like that story. I remember when I first watched that movie, I was super excited for it. It was like, a modern day Peter Pan with Hugh Jackman, and like, it's going to be super cool. And I felt like they almost had a good idea of kind of this origin story of Peter Pan. Like, where did he come from? Like, how did Neverland become the place that it was?
Yeah,
and
it was cool.
It was
world building.
almost cool world building. It was almost a good idea, just horribly executed.
Yeah.
And I remember going home. I don't know if I watched it in the theater or streaming online or whatever, but I totally remember when the movie was done, going to my computer, opening a notes page, and like really, I could probably find it somewhere on my computer, but I literally just opened up a document and started writing. These are Brandon's critiques to the Pan movie, and how if I was the writer, I would write it better. And it was years ago, so I don't remember what it was, but I could probably find it.
Yeah, that's good.
But that was
That's
definitely an experience where seeing something not work very well made me super confident in my writing abilities. So like, dude, I don't even really know how to write, but if I was in those writing meetings, guaranteed I would have written a better story. Yeah.
Print out, send to the producer. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's like, you can almost like tell when something's like an affront to the original idea or story or something, and it's like that's not in the spirit of like what I like, It's like
Yeah,
that doesn't match up, or yeah, there's a few something's off. But
yeah,
again, that's the perfect example of kind of what I was talking about, where it's something you're because you have to be invested in it a little bit, like emotionally. And like you said, you read the book twice, you were like excited for it, and then it didn't like live up. So it's like it causes you to still reflect. Whereas like if you saw some just trashy, dumb movie that you didn't care about, it would go like in one ear and out the other. Like you wouldn't sit and think about it for whatever, however long.
yeah. That's true.
But yeah, huh, interesting.
So either people need to go out and listen to a whole bunch of, or read a bunch of really crappy stories, or only stick with the good ones. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
find something that's not very good and see if you can do it better. I don't know. Maybe that
yeah.
inspires people.
Do you ever watch or read stuff that just like sticks with you and you have no reason why? Or it's
Like in
like,
terms of inspiring me, or it just sticks with
uh,
me.
just sticks with you, like kind of runs through your mind. Like you go into it with no expectation, and then then you find yourself like thinking a lot about it over the, following weeks or whatever.
I mean, there's, sort of those mind trip movies like The Matrix or Inception
Mm.
or things like that, where they totally put you through this like mind puzzle, and then it takes forever to kind of figure it out, and you have to go online and read the Wikipedia page or the Reddits or whatever and try to figure out like, I don't even know what I
So
just
was he
experienced.
sleeping the whole time, or was he being controlled
Yeah.
by mind aliens? Both?
Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, um,
Yeah, those are
yeah,
always good.
anyway, so yeah, figuring, and I mean, now there's whole, influencers on social media and YouTube who created this whole platform of like explaining the mysterious movies and
Here's
movie
10 Easter
theories
eggs you
and
missed
yeah,
from your
all those
favorite
things.
whatever. Yeah.
The ending of this movie explained, things like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, before
They're
before
doing
those
God's
types
work.
of videos were, that's right. Before, before those videos were out there, and you couldn't just get the explanation instantly, you had to like work it out in your own brain. So yeah, there were definitely movies where I had to sit and think about it over and over, and
Or go
like,
talk
oh,
to
I
your
don't
local
understand.
movie geek.
Yeah, like you'd have to find somebody else who'd watched the movie before you, and
Yeah.
then they've been thinking about it for longer and be like, I can't work out how this movie, like, I don't understand. Like, oh, Neo is the one, like the number one, like ones and zeros in computers, or it's like, oh, I get it. You have to
Yeah.
work out problems like that in your
Some of the
mind.
like symbolism or code of like a certain work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Which, I mean, I do like it when there's a story that has those layers that you
Yeah.
just don't get through all the layers in the first viewing, and you have to think about it in order to get down into the deeper layers. And that's just very well executed artistic symbolism in movies or
Yeah.
stories, I should say. And that's always really enjoyable to have that.
Yeah. I'm always super curious where that comes from because it feels like it's more of a um maybe something that people don't even do consciously. It's just from people who have lived more rich lives. And so they pick up on intuitively on patterns and just different nuances of life and relationships with people. It's like you can't really like fake that kind of thing, I guess, of just having experience and breadth of of knowledge essentially. But I wonder if because that seems to be what a lot of times defines good, what people would consider like good art or something between, as opposed to just like um, drivel, for lack of a better word, is kind of the complexity, like
Drivel's a good word.
yeah, the complexity, like you're saying, or like the depth. And so I wonder if like how I don't know, because like I guess with like the Rings of Power, it doesn't seem like there's like a lot of depth, necessarily outside of Tolkien's stuff that he's already put in, like inspired in the show, like with the settings or whatever, or the races. It's like most of the depth seems like you have to go to an external source where there's already a bunch of depth written in. But for the show itself, I didn't necessarily see a lot. But Um, yeah, I just yeah, it's weird like how that comes about. And actually I think the best example of that is kind of the Bible, where it's um, you know, it's you could read it super simply, but the second you like go one step deeper, it unlocks like 30 steps and you're like, "Oh, interesting." Like, okay.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
this
true. There's a
this
lot
one
of stories
parable,
that are.
works
Oh yeah, go ahead.
at this level of just a story, but then, you like will be doing something in your daily life and you'd be like, this is like that parable. It's
Right.
like super complex. Sorry to cut you off there.
Oh no, it's yeah, there's a lot of stories where it's like you unlock one door and that was it. It was a one door deep thing. But then in the
Yeah.
Bible, you unlock one thing and as soon as you open that door, two more doors are behind it and you just keep unlocking more stuff, because it all
Yeah.
interconnects. And
Yeah.
so, everything kind of interprets the other part of the Bible and it makes it even more interesting. And then you just have to keep
Yeah.
reading because it's like, oh, I never understood this book of the Bible, but now that I've read this other book, now,
Hmm.
the next one makes sense. Like, whoa, blowing my mind. So,
Yeah. And the fact
yeah,
that like the Old Testament is so ingrained in the New Testament, there's like callbacks to the Old Testament and like quoting the Old Testament in the New Testament. And then like, but there's foreshadowing from the Old Testament into the New Testament. It's like everything is
yeah,
interlinked in these like threads that are, kind of like, I guess, culminate in Jesus in some sense. And like, but I guess more ultimately maybe a plan for the world. But, then it's like people who are in like these characters who are in tune with the whole story or the pattern can like point to certain threads and start like linking things, throughout the story in ways that you wouldn't expect. And it's like to me,
yeah.
that's super rich storytelling. And
That's true, honestly. Yeah,
yeah,
and just in thinking of like things that have inspired me for creativity, definitely Genesis 1 through 11 is a
yeah,
very inspirational part of the Bible for
yeah.
creative thinking if you look deep into the symbolism there, for sure.
Well, that's why people keep retelling it in all their fantasy stories, and
Yeah.
whatever traditions and myths. And, it's like always, yeah, anybody that like kind of messes with that somehow like always kind of skirts around that sort of, model of things, I guess, with fantasy stories. Is, I wonder if there's any like more, I'm trying to think of like maybe a fantasy story where they're not like, where they're like super naturalistic and don't have any like spiritual powers or anything. Seems like every fantasy story always has some sort of like spirit entity or
Mm,
something in it. Huh,
yeah.
I'll have to look into
Yeah.
that.
Mm,
But yeah, because that seems like almost the trope of fantasy is that you have like a more magical world or mystical place or something like that where there is like spiritual forces or powers. Huh.
that's true. Yeah, there is sort of a connection. There is almost like a spiritual sense either to like some sort of inner power inside of you. And oh, you doing okay there? Anyway, I'll keep talking. But while you're like dying over there, yeah, I think that it is true in a lot of fantasy. People have sort of this like internal magic or spiritual system that usually
Hmm.
works that is like very obvious and open.
Yeah,
And there's not really like a whole lot of debate of like, oh, is there magic or is there not? It's like, no, everybody knows there's magic. Like,
of course.
everybody has it. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess that maybe in the Harry Potter world, they keep it a secret, but it's like
yeah.
for those who know the secret, like everybody knows it and agrees that there's like, magic and
Hmm.
stuff.
And no one ever
And
really like describes it either. It's always just kind of like a taken for granted thing that there's this extra physical power.
hmm,
And I guess if you grew up in that, it wouldn't even be like surprising or anything. It's just like how probably ancient people didn't like question that there was you know, like of course there's a god of wood or something, like
yeah,
that's obvious. If you just grew up always believing that, it would just you'd be the weird one for thinking that it wasn't, some deity in your bronze statue or something
yeah,
or and I don't know that they maybe literally thought it that way, but maybe that was their representation of a being they thought was there or something, or maybe it was there. Who knows? With
yeah,
all those spiritual principalities and stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, Yeah, because you got like, I like what you did with your magic system in your story. That was like, I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I know. I really
Yeah.
like that. And that's actually, yeah, that's totally based off of the Bible. Just thinking of how, like, if God had all these, like, heavenly spiritual powers, and there's all these
Hmm.
power, spiritual beings that are maybe they're, like, residing over different parts of his creation. If
Hmm.
you wanted to have control over the creation, you would basically be interacting with this spiritual being in order to have this magical power. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I know. Because I feel like a lot of magic systems in stories have to do with some sort of uh like some sort of power system that's either an inanimate source of power. It's like almost like the force, like the
Mm.
force is like, is it a living thing? Is it not a living thing? It's just sort of this like energy in the universe that exists everywhere and people can just like tap into it and use it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just kind of overdone, and I don't necessarily always enjoy that type of. It just feels too convenient almost.
Mm.
Like, yeah, there's just magical power wherever, unlimited energy, and I can just use it because I feel like it.
Reach out and
I
grab
don't
it.
know. Yeah, it's like I don't know where's that coming from? Who's just is there somebody deciding over that? And so I think
Yeah.
making a
Is there a structure to it,
personality.
or is it like completely loose and flowing?
Yeah, I liked the idea that your magic would almost be more of a relationship as opposed to just like I'm in charge and do whatever I want kind of thing,
Well, I
you
think that
know?
kind of like sets the stage for, I guess you could call it dark magic or whatever, versus like light magic, where, I think a lot of dark magic, even in real life, I guess, is defined by um, trying to bind spiritual powers and like capture them to make them do what
Mm,
you want, um, versus like probably working with them, or like I think you mentioned at one point, being respectful towards the process, or like respecting the element to like be allowed access to use it.
mm,
So it's like those are two different approaches. One's trying to control the spirit that controls the element, and that would be like a darker magic, I would say. And I think that's actually what a lot of dark spiritual practices revolve around here on earth. It's like trying to like bind whatever spirit you're trying to like exert control and power. And then versus, being, I think, yeah, like, I mean, it's integrity, but if you're like actually respectful and like using it for good, like it wouldn't be in my mind, it wouldn't be a problem to be allowed, access to that power, because your outcome's going to be good and your intention is good.
yeah,
So
yeah, totally.
that's cool. All right, man. I want to hear it inspires you, since we went down the rabbit hole on that
Well,
one.
I know. Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about with stories. Okay, what inspires me? Well, very generic, but I feel like there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with this.
Totally.
This past week, I've been thinking about how the sky is very inspiring, right?
Hmm.
Um, I gotta say this for a few different reasons.
Okay.
One, I've realized that when you look at the sky, you know, it's basically like a gigantic movie theater screen that's always changing and has interesting things going on.
Like the
Like
world's biggest
there's
IMAX.
yeah, I mean, it's like throughout all human history, you look at the sky and it's basically like a giant screen of interesting things that are happening. There's clouds going by, it's changing colors. At nighttime, there's stars, there's the moon, the sun is in the sky. In our
That's
modern
true.
era, there's like planes that go by. It's like there's always something happening. And it's basically like a giant, like amphitheater of just like, oh, look up in the sky and see what's going on. But
Yeah.
then when you look at the sky, I mean, you can determine what time of day it is. You can determine like weather patterns.
Hmm.
In ancient times, they looked at the stars and there was a lot of spiritual connection with like symbolism through the stars. And
Yeah.
people were just like very astute, either worshipers or students, just always knowing the patterns of the stars and the mathematics behind star positions and things.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of interaction with human history and that we do on a daily basis between us and the sky that I feel
Hmm.
like, you don't even really think about it, but it's like we look at the sky a lot, and there's a lot of stuff in life we do with the sky, you know?
Yeah,
And
for never really being up there or like
yeah,
interacting with it in any way outside of just sight, I guess.
yeah,
But,
you know,
huh.
I think that's almost what makes the invention of flying in planes like
Mm.
so crazy miraculous, especially when you think about how in ancient cultures they always looked at the sky as like the home of the gods, you know? It's like it's heaven, that's where like the celestial beings live. And
Hmm.
it's like, whoa, now we've entered that space. And for,
Yeah.
a few $100s, like you can fly through the sky, you know? And you
Next
can
to
look
two of
down.
your least favorite humans at
Yeah.
that moment. No, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
stuck in between a chair,
Yeah.
looking through a tiny little peephole window while somebody's snoring. And yeah, anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but no, it's, now the perspective has shifted. Now you're in the theater and you're looking back at the audience,
Mm.
and that's kind of a cool experience.
Or I guess
Um,
you could even look further up too then and be like, you know, now you get even more access to the sky because you're above the clouds or,
that's
whatever.
true.
And it's like, gets even weirder. And yeah, huh, I
Yeah.
like that thought.
And I think a couple other things with the sky that have been
Hmm.
interesting to me, and I know that we've talked about this just in the past, but living originally down in Southern California where the sky is always blue and it like never changes,
Yeah,
you get kind of bored with the blue sky. But then living up here now in, North Idaho, it's like, oh, there's clouds and storms and the sky changes. And so I think the sky's
constantly.
become a lot more interesting for me. And
Hmm.
whenever there's big cumulus clouds or interesting clouds, it's like you've heard me say this, like I always want to point it out, and my wife hears me say it all the time. I'm always like, "Oh, babe, look at those beautiful clouds in the distance right there. Like I love those clouds right now." And she's like, "Yeah, honey, they're clouds." And it's like, well, most of my life I didn't really see clouds, like clouds are cool. And
Yeah,
so there's just, there's like all this stuff that can happen in the sky and it's like fun to watch.
yeah. When
Um,
I have a random thought about clouds
yeah,
that's
go ahead.
always, I don't know if it's inspiring, but it's always interested me. So when you see a cloud in the sky, do you ever like wonder how many like miles across it is or like how long it is? Do you ever
Yeah,
think
that
about
is an
that?
interesting thought. Like those are actually huge structures floating
Yeah.
through air.
It's like if you were to like drive across it, is it 20 miles? Is it like half the state? I don't know, it like looks like it could be, some of these massive clouds look like they could be like the size of, North Idaho for all I know. Or
That's true. Especially
yeah.
when it's like stormy and the whole sky is just clouds.
Hmm.
And if you were to look at that on like some satellite photo of like how much cloud coverage is across this part of the United States, it could be like a
Yeah.
whole state or bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And specifically like those white clouds that are like look almost solid, that are really far like big. It's like,
Yeah.
man, like I would love to just like get on top of one and just get some perspective and see like how big like this one cloud is, or when there's a few different sizes in the air. It's like it's hard to really gauge because not only like up above, which makes them like harder to gauge, I would say, but then they're also like in the distance. And so
Mm.
it's, maybe it's like an optical illusion where it's like it's so far away, but maybe it's bigger than, maybe it's actually like the size of my state. I don't know, it's just so far away.
It's true.
I always think
Yeah.
about that. I'm
That's
like,
true. Yeah.
just want to know the
Mm.
exact measurements of them.
Mm.
But yeah, huh. So yeah,
Yeah.
have you
The
ever
clouds.
been to like an observatory or anything, or like done any telescope looking?
Yeah, I have done some telescope looking. Yeah, not recently, years ago, but yeah, looking through telescopes at the night sky.
Mm.
Um, and if you have a good telescope and you can look through it and really see a little bit more of like the design of a planet or something, and you
Mm.
can kind of see like a little ring around Saturn or something. I have looked
That's
through
cool.
some big telescopes and seen that,
Huh.
and that's really cool. It's way more fun to look at it through a telescope than it is to like look at it on, a Google image or something.
Yeah,
It's really neat.
kind of brings it home that you're looking at a real object instead
Yeah.
of something like somebody just drew or something.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a
I mean,
picture, but yeah,
maybe a space dome. I don't know, whatever, but
yeah, that's funny.
no, yeah, the
Yeah, there's
planet
actually
after.
up here in Diamond Lake, there's actually like a astronomer guy that like invents telescopes, and he's doing
Oh,
like a
that's cool.
workshop this
What?
upcoming week for
Oh,
like letting people, the public, basically just come and look through his telescopes and stuff.
whoa, that's
Yeah,
cool.
the only catch is it's Seventh Day Adventist.
I
So,
mean, I'll
but
blend in.
yeah, you might have to sit through like a little lecture to look it through his telescope. I'm not sure, but I
Okay.
don't know. Some of those telescopes are like the same price as a house, so like I
Oh my
wouldn't.
gosh, yeah, I believe
Well,
that.
I don't. That might be an exaggeration. Maybe a car,
I mean, it
but
just depends how nice your house is, but
yeah, actually, that's true. It's the same price as my house. That's for sure. Uh,
uh,
your
yeah,
life.
yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
think the other thing I was going to mention with the sky that's inspiring, going back to biblical literature, is when you read about how, God talks about how his throne is in the heavens and earth is his footstool.
Hmm.
And you read different parts of like Revelation or in the book of Ezekiel where it describes the throne room of God and how there's kind of this like clear glass floor, and
Mm.
the glass floor is often described as being like sapphire or blue.
Yeah.
And I've heard it either described as being like the ocean, but in my mind, I think of that almost as like the sky. Like you have
Hmm.
this blue sky and God's throne is like right above it. And it's almost this imagery of like, again, that heaven in the sky where God is like sitting on the blue sky looking down at people.
Hmm.
And, that's just kind of my own mindset of that literature, but I think that there's a good argument to be made for that symbolism in certain passages of the Bible,
Hmm.
and I think that that also makes the sky inspiring to look at it when you think of like, gosh, God literally has this symbolism, and you could have this imagery where you're looking into the sky, and it's almost like, wow, I'm like looking up to God. It's like I'm looking up into this heavenly realm,
Hmm.
and I think that makes the sky even more fun because it almost feels like this connection to the spiritual realm.
Hmm.
And I kind of like thinking of the sky that way, in that very spiritual sense. The
Hmm.
clouds and kind of that Greek mythology where they show angels in the clouds and whatnot, even though they showed cherubs as like little babies, which I don't think that's what a cherub is. But,
I think that was more Roman,
they,
right? Or was that
maybe that was
Greek?
Roman. I don't know, Greco-Roman, those people.
Yeah.
So I think that that's just another thought I have with the sky that is inspiring as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool when you can like have a physical manifestation of like some spiritual principle. Wasn't there, what was the, was Emerald just the New Jerusalem stuff, or was there ever like a Sea of Emerald too, or was that, maybe I do remember the Sapphire
There's
thing,
there's
but I
something with
think
emerald in it, but I can't think of
maybe it
what
was
it
just
is.
the
I'll have to
doors of
go.
like New Jerusalem or something, or like, um, yeah. Well,
I
it's
don't
cool because
know. I
like
can't.
even those colors are representative of different things, and like you said, it's like, and I think that's actually one of those really, we were talking about the depth earlier, it's like I think that's one of those things that could just have like multiple layers of depth, it's like, yeah, the sky is blue, and it's like it works on that level, and like sapphire probably represents something too, like the just the toughness of the mineral, or some weird thing like also represents stuff. But yeah, because like jewels seem to be like kind of used commonly for like symbolism, I guess. It seems
Yeah, I
like,
think they are. Yeah, the color of jewels having to do with like different symbolic meanings. I don't know what all the different meanings are, but I agree
yeah,
with you. Yeah.
because even like the new age kind of spiritual stuff uses a lot of different like rocks for different, or stones for different like purposes, or associate different things with different stone, and even like the ephods and stuff in the Bible. That's what it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was like
yeah,
something that
because
the priest wore, the high priest wore, that had like a bunch of gems in it. Yeah.
yeah, and supposedly they like lit up or something, like, and
Oh,
like
did it?
I think so, like a
Hmm.
Simon Says pattern, and they would interpret. No, I don't know. I mean, I think they lit
Like
up
those
or
kids'
something.
toys where it glows and you press the button on the glowing thing, or
Exactly.
what? Yeah.
I think they lit up, but don't quote me on that. I might just be spreading heresy. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We spread a little bit of that around, Heresy has to be
Yeah.
shared. Yeah.
It's better with a friend.
It's better with a friend. Oh
Um,
man. That's probably what the telescope guy thinks. Anyway.
yeah.
Um, you
Uh,
know, a thought for you is, and just for anybody listening too, with the sky is, I just wonder, when do we actually look at the sky? Like, do we only ever look at it when we go outside and get in our car and we go drive somewhere? We're checking the weather. It's like, how often do we sit down and just look up at the sky, whether it's the daytime or the night sky, it's clouds, storms, whatever, and you just enjoy the theater of the sky that you have? I don't know. It's like, I think for me, it's easier to do that at nighttime because there's a little bit more to look at, unless it's like clouds in the sky.
yeah.
But I don't usually just spend time like, I'm just going to stare at the sky and like look at it right now, I don't
Yeah.
know. But I think I should do more of that.
Just take moments, and it's probably very meditative.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
basically this like endless infinity right above our heads.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. If you
Mhm.
were offered a spot on like a space tourism trip, would you go?
I mean, yeah, if there were no risks or cons to it, I mean, it sounds like it's just
Yeah.
yeah,
Quick jaunt up into space, break the atmosphere.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I would definitely go do that for sure.
I think that it freaks some people out, I think, but yeah, I would do it for sure too.
Well, it depends if they serve cocktails or not, but
Yeah.
no, I'm just
Would you
kidding.
do,
That'd
would you do a
probably make you
spacewalk?
throw up. Oh yeah, if they let me go out of the space thing in a spacesuit, like
Yeah.
that's one of those things where it's like I'd be bragging about that for the rest of my life. It's, hey, my name's Brandon. I just want to let you know that once I went out in space and stuff, but I know you
Brandon
don't believe me,
Spacewalker.
but I just wanted to let you know that. Yeah,
I had my last name legally changed to Brandon Spacewalker.
spacewalker. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm not just a skywalker. I'm a spacewalker.
Yeah. Dude, that would be that, like, I think about that sometimes, and it would just, like, it blows my mind even just thinking about it. So I can't even
Yeah.
imagine like doing it where you just look down and see, like, black abyss for
Yeah.
like 30 million light years.
Yeah. It's like,
Like-
you can't even fall. It's like you almost feel like you're supposed to be falling somewhere, but it's like
Yeah.
there's nowhere to fall to. Like, you're just floating. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you are falling though, is the weird thing, because like when
Mm.
you're orbiting, like you're actually the gravity's another freaking tripping thing, but like because when you're circling the Earth, you're actually just like falling, and
Circling the drain.
yeah, kind of, yeah, like basically the Earth's pulling you in, but you're falling straight down, and so like you're always just falling, but basically the pool of Earth is just keeping you locked in, but you're still falling, and so that's how
Yeah.
you like orbit. And so it's really wild. But then, like, the reason it looks like you're floating is because you're like with the space station you're on, it's like you're falling at the same rate is basically what it is. So it like looks stationary to you, but you're actually like falling with it at the same speed, and you just like, so it's all relative essentially, which
Yeah.
is kind of trippy.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you were at a stationary speed and the space station's going by you, it's going whatever 1,000 miles an hour or something, a couple thousand miles an hour. And it would just like be like this screaming piece of metal if you were still. It'd be
It's
so
true.
weird.
It's
Like, just,
true. Yeah.
get like smashed. But what was the other question I was going to ask you? Sky, would you spacewalk? Yeah, that spacewalking.
Spacewalking.
That would
Moonwalking
mess-
is another trip too, because I don't think they do any manned missions to the moon anymore. I think it's all
Yeah.
about, sending things over to Mars now. So,
I think they actually have a few planned.
oh, do they?
Yeah, NASA has a new mission that they're trying to like set up a moon base.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, until they do that, you think about it, it's like, how many people have actually set foot on the moon? Like,
Yeah.
not that many,
Yeah.
And so for anybody who's like, yeah, I stepped on the moon once, it's like, whoa, you're a very select, like, exclusive group of people.
Yeah.
You know?
How do astronauts stay so humble? That's the real
Yeah.
question.
Basically, did you ever see, what was that thing? There was like a There was this really great, I think it was a deodorant commercial once years ago that I watched where there's this girl swimming in the ocean and the shark is
Hmm.
going to come eat her, and the lifeguard jumps in and punches the shark and saves her and swims her out of the water, and then he's like laying her on the beach, and she like gasps for air and comes up and is like, suddenly she's awake and she sees the lifeguard, and then she looks away and like goes running away from him, and there's like this astronaut walking on the beach, and she's like, oh my gosh, an astronaut. And it was like, oh yeah, those guys are kind of the coolest people ever. So sorry, lifeguard.
Yeah, tough luck there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, like, you'd have a whole, being on the moon and stuff, you'd have a whole different set of like, I guess it'd be the same stars you're looking at, but it would be like definitely a different perspective, like, because I'm sure you've been out on like a clear night versus like a foggy night,
Yeah.
but even not having the atmosphere there, it would just probably be like, oof, get to see like the Milky Way in its full array, I guess.
Yeah.
Just be like so gnarly.
Yeah. That's actually kind of an interesting thing to think about, is that like if you're in outer space, if you're beyond the atmosphere, it's like, what is the sky?
Yeah.
Like I think the sky really is just our atmosphere within planet Earth. But it's like if you're beyond the atmosphere, it's like, are you in the sky? I mean, you're like in space at that point,
Yeah.
So it's like
Interesting.
you're like beyond the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting to think about.
I guess that's why, yeah, you probably call it the heavens, I guess,
Yeah.
in some sense. But, huh. Yeah, it is weird. And it's like the fact that people can even get past their own sky is kind of like, almost seems like some sort of like, not blasphemy, but like something that's like maybe, not supposed to happen or something, it's like,
Mm.
it's like the hamster getting out of the cage. It's like, no, no, no. You like scoot him back in. It's like, you weren't supposed to be out there.
Yeah. Yeah. You've
Like
gone beyond what's good for you.
yeah, you had this really good, like, cage. Like, why are you going to go run out? You're going to like run into the washer vent, and get torn up or something. Like,
Yeah.
no, no,
There's a
no,
cat
stay
out
back.
there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this was your good place. Like, you don't need to leave it.
I feel
You're
like
trying
there's
to go.
been so many movies about that where it's like, oh, like humanity's getting beyond what they should have tried to do. You like created a time machine, or you're playing God now, or you're whatever it is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that instinct to leave? It's like, there's a fiery shield that like destroys your stuff upon re-entry for a reason,
Yeah.
which is crazy. Like the atmosphere can cause that much like friction on something
Yeah.
that like you literally like burn up like rocks. It's so hot.
Yeah.
Just,
That's
like,
actually kind of ridiculous to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's just a testament to how fast you can go, like just coming back in, I guess,
Yeah.
because you never really think about it, but like even the sky it's kind of like, it's like the sky is kind of the same thing as the ocean. It's just a different density, so it's like you still, just like, that's what I always constantly think about is how, it's like, so with water, like all that changes is the density of the material. And it's like the only reason it feels like there's nothing air wise is because it's just not as dense, But to like a fish, like water is just the sky, it's like they breathe
It's
it,
true.
they, like move around in it just fine. It like doesn't really bother them. To us, it's like deadly because it's denser, but like air has water in it,
Yeah.
And so when you think about like, when I always think about, like, cause I'm always worried about like water pollution and stuff and like getting in bodies of water. But then you think about like the sky and it's like, for some reason you're like, ooh, fresh, clean air. But it's like people pump just as much crap into the air as they do in the water,
Yeah, somebody could have farted near you,
They could have.
The
It
fish,
hasn't had
fish,
time to, yeah.
yeah,
Hasn't
there's
had
fish
time to
poop, there's
go ahead, yeah.
disperse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, dispersed to China yet.
Oh, Yeah.
So
It is funny when you think about, I mean, two things that you said. One, the atmosphere and the friction of the air, it's actually like a shield for us against foreign objects from outer space, like meteorites or whatever. It's like if we didn't have the sky, that
hmm
atmospheric friction, there would be so much stuff that would burn up in the atmosphere. It would just hit us and like tear our planet apart.
yeah,
So it's like, wow, the sky is totally shielding us from celestial bodies. But
yeah,
then thinking about the ocean as well, it's true. Like fish are basically like the birds of the ocean. They're like flying around all the time. And I guess it's like, I don't know, crabs are like stuck on the ground or whatever. And so they're like the people who live on the earth and fish are flying. But then
yeah.
it's like, what are we? Like here we are above the water. Maybe we're like the sky of the fish, or we're like the
Sky
heavenly,
crabs.
we're the outer space of the fish, you know?
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's why. What is it? Fish and birds are made on the same day
Yeah.
because they're like the same thing.
Maybe.
They're the flying things of their environment.
Yeah.
And then you have flying fish, which are just the anomaly and weird.
Uh,
Like break all the rules. Maybe they're the
yeah.
astronauts of the ocean world.
Yeah, they're either really cool or they're like weird mutants and they should have never existed. I don't know, one or the other.
There's a lot of animals like that. Yeah.
A platypus. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Uh,
Those are really interesting thoughts.
yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, that's actually okay, just a whole different divergent thought. Maybe we should save it for another time, but you
I
think
want to hear it.
about you think about how we always dream up these magical animals. Like I wish there
hmm
were dragons and unicorns and all these things. And it's like if you just look at the animals around in our current world, there's definitely some crazy stuff that it's like, dude, I would have never been able to invent a bug that glows, a
Yeah.
firefly or like little pufferfish or swordfish or like,
Yeah.
oh, what if there was,
Like,
like,
I
what
want a
if there was a
unicorn.
horse? Yeah,
It's like
it's like, dude, we
there's
have
literally a
rhinos
fish with a
and
saw on its head forehead.
yeah, it's like, dude, we got like so many crazy like magical creatures. It's just that because they're not, it's just because they're real. It's like, oh, that's boring. But it's like that's like a straight out of a magic fantasy story, but it's like a real thing, and we just
Yeah.
don't appreciate it.
Yeah. Narwhals. Like, what are
Yeah,
those? Yeah. Well, and the weird thing is like people get bored of them, but like no one's really seen a narwhal. It's like
yeah,
you
I've
know,
never seen a narwhal.
yeah, and if you saw one up cool, it'd be like up close or like, in nature, that would be like, you see like a cool deer or elk in Idaho and everyone loses their mind. Like, oh,
It's
did you
true.
see that elk? And that's just like an elk. So I think
Yeah.
like being removed from some of those like animals as well also leads to that
Mm,
dissatisfaction or something, or like not being
that's
as
true.
interested.
That's true.
'Cause-
Like honestly, we're just bored with the photo books of
yeah,
narwhals and lions and tigers and bears and whatever. But if you were
yeah,
like literally in the wild and there's a lion, it'd be like, this is a very scary but
interesting
really
moment.
cool. Yeah, it's like, whoa, this animal became very interesting all of a sudden. There it is.
It's taking all my attention. I
Yeah,
hope it doesn't see me.
I just
Yeah.
needed to stay still long enough for my Instagram photo.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The one other thing I wanted to touch on with the sky too is, or I guess maybe specifically like heaven and earth, is like in a symbolic perspective of that. The like there's a cool relationship where like the sky is related to, or just the sky slash heaven is related to. Oof. Is related to like basically principle or order or like I guess logos would be the right word, but that it might not have any practical application. But basically like structure, order, or information, or those types of things. And then the earth is like potential and kind of like chaos, not in like a negative sense, but just in a unordered sense. So it's like potentiality, chaos, soil, all these kinds of things that like aren't necessarily alive, or they're waiting to be transformed. And so like the merging of like the sky and earth, or heaven and earth, is merging like identity and order and like pattern with like raw potential and like matter and building blocks of things. And so like when those meet, they actually um that's like what gives um like form to things and like makes things alive essentially, or makes them part of like a bigger pattern, is like when those two forces meet. And so it'd be like the breath or the wind is like associated with, you know, like the spirit of the sky. And then you have like the body of Adam, you know, and like from the dirt. And so it's like the meeting of like these two things is brings about like a complete identity. And so like that's something I've always kind of, when I think of the sky as well, and like heaven or whatnot, it's like it's kind of the ephemeral side of things, I guess, and like the non-tangible um sense. And then like it kind of like almost embodies or like comes down on earth, and then um like brings about the patterns in like a physical manifestation, I suppose, is the most clear way I could say that. But
Mm.
um yeah, that's often what I think about, like symbolizing wise of that, because it's like it's very much about the, because we were kind of talking about that earlier with the, where like the physical manifestation of something can be um representative of like a pattern that's behind the scenes, you know. And so I think those representations are like um yeah, are always interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see how, you know, there's like patterns of seasons that
Mm,
come back, and that's determined by the sky and the weather, and that influences temperatures and celestial bodies and the way that the earth is spinning in space and the sun and the moon. And then those things determine what you do with your soil and growing seasons and animal movement migrations and where people want to live. And so much
yeah,
stuff on earth gets determined by constant seasons. And if you don't have those exchanging of seasons, then things get too cold or they get too hot, or it's
yeah,
like it kind of creates balance on the earth. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, yeah. There's that balance is important, you know, because it's like everything is so complex, you know. When you look at, it's probably why meteorologists have such a tough time because it's like they're trying
Mm,
to, you know, use these models to predict, you know, well, it was 10 degrees warmer over here and there was, you know, extra humidity over here. And so the storm rolled, you know, 90 miles an hour at this direction. And then, but it hit like this pocket of static electricity in the air and then just got shifted. And it's like there's so many forces that we don't understand, even in the sky, that are, you know, shaping things there. Um, yeah,
yeah, that's
cool.
cool.
Well, I like
That's
that
cool, man.
topic, man.
Yeah, dude. Some inspiring things for the peoples.
And like you said, you know, or alluded to, it's more like, you know, it might be something that people take for granted, where it's like, you know,
Mm.
how much time do you spend looking at the sky, you know, for all that's going on, and for, you know, how much is happening up there. It's like, yeah,
It's kind of a magical thing, honestly. Like you
yeah,
either have like this, it's a giant movie screen, and at nighttime you have all these like amazing little dots in the sky that are really beautiful to look at, and they have like little symbols and some
hmm,
patterns in them. And in the day you might have like clouds and colors and a big blue and maybe some
yeah,
planes going by and
yeah. Each one
like
of those little
so,
dots is like the size of your solar system, or no, I mean not your solar
or
system,
it's like a
like,
galaxy or something. It's like a whole,
or yeah,
yeah.
I guess it might be the size of your solar system, or each little star, you know, it could be like there's stars that are like, you know, our sun is like dwarfed by, which is
Yeah.
crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everyone appreciate your sky.
That's right.
That's my
And
takeaway.
good or bad stories, poorly executed, you know,
Yeah.
creative projects where people had lots of opportunities.
Blue ball.
Uh,
All right. Well, on that note, everyone stay inspired and thanks for tuning in. Brandon, we'll see you next week.
you got it, man. I know. Good convo as always. Enjoy the
Actually, we might have a
peoples.
guest next week too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We might have a guest here soon.
Yeah, we're
Stay
working
tuned
on
for
it.
that.
So
One
if you want to
person
be a
who listens
guest,
to
call
us.
in. our, our number is my email address. You know it, you know it.
If you know
All
it, you know it. That's right.
right. All right. Take it easy, everyone.
Yeah.